All right, so now I'm going to continue. So, step one, take a minute. We're going to remember, we're going to factor, then cross cancel, and simplify. Pause the recording and you can try the next one. All right, now check your work. The top fraction factored out to x plus 3 times x minus 4 over x plus 3 times x minus 3. That was a difference of squares. In the next one, x squared minus 2x minus 3, that factors out to x plus 1 times x minus 3. And the bottom, second denominator, factors out to x plus 2 times the quantity of x minus 4. Now, we can factor out common factors like x plus 3. I also have an x plus, we can do anything, it's numerator to denominator. So the next one, I can do an x minus 3, and an x minus 4, and an x minus 4, and then an x minus 3 and an x minus 3, and what we're left with is x plus 1 times the quantity, over the quantity of x plus 2. All right, now let's try another. Now this one's a little bit different in that if you notice in the second fraction, we've got something that looks similar. However, the 1 is positive and here the 1 is negative. Also, the A is negative and the A here is positive. So they're exact opposites. When you have a situation like that, if the binomial looks the same except they're both exact opposites, we can factor out a negative 1. And so what I'll do is rewrite my first fraction, and I can rewrite that as negative 1 times the quantity of A minus 1. Now I have something to cross cancel. A minus 1, binomial, and I can factor out a 2. So what we're left with is 3 over negative 2. Now pause the recording and you try the next one. All right, now check your work. Got a pair of t plus 2's, binomials that I can cancel out. I can cancel out a factor of 3. And remember, I can rewrite that 1 as negative 1 times the quantity of t minus 3, and then my t minus 3's cancel out. So what we're left with is, let me rewrite that because I know it's getting cut off, is 2t let me rewrite that. It's 2t over negative 1 times 3 plus t. Now I know my PowerPoint goes further, but you can just leave it like that. PowerPoint writes it as negative 2t over t plus 3. All right, should try another one. Now sometimes we get the trinomial factoring where the lead coefficient is not a 1. If that's the case, your factoring is going to be much more difficult. So take a minute, pause the recording, see if you can simplify to the answer. Okay, now check your work. Now hopefully when you factored in the second step, in the first step, before you did anything, you GCF'd. And so right here in that first step, you should have noticed there's a GCF there. It's always the first thing we're doing. So we didn't have to factor with a lead coefficient. Made it much easier. All right. Oops. So let's try one more. Let's factor out, for the first one, we can factor out an x in the first fraction. And I'm left with x minus 4. The second fraction, and the denominator I can't do anything, and the numerator of the second fraction, nothing. But I can break down the second fraction to a difference of squares. So you're going to have all the different kinds of factoring. And now we just start cross-canceling. Now, the one thing that we needed to do here is, this is asking us to do two things. The first thing is to state the domain for x. So actually, I think what I would do is factor out first and then simplify, whereas my PowerPoint does it the other way. So it's at this point, because this is where I can truly see what makes up my denominator. And remember when we were talking about the domain for a number, we're looking for what are the possible values for x. Well, if we have fractions, the big rule is thou shalt not divide by 0. So just a reminder, thou shalt not divide by 0. So all three of these denominators I can't have equal to 0. So it's at this point I know that if x squared equaled 0, that would give me a 0 in the denominator. But then I can set my other two, x plus 4 equal to 0 and x minus 4 equal to 0, and I can do x squared equal to 0. So to lose the square root, I take the square, and what I get is x is equal to 0. For this one, I can add 4, end up with, x equals 4. Here I'm subtracting 4, and I get x equals negative 4. So I have three possible solutions of what could give me a 0 in that denominator. The first one could be a 0. The first one could be a 0. The next one, for x to equal 0, I cannot have x equal 0. I cannot have x equal negative 4. And I cannot have x equal positive 4. So the way that we write that is, I'm going to now simplify. I've got those three things down. X cannot equal 4, x cannot equal negative 4, and x cannot equal 0. I've noticed that at this point where I can see all the factors. Now I can cross cancel. Get rid of my x minus 4s. I can also get rid of an x. I can get rid of another x from the numerator and the diagonal denominator, and then I'm left with 2. The simplified version is 2 over x plus 4, and my domain is x is such that x is an element of the reals, and x cannot equal 0, and x cannot equal 4, or x cannot equal negative 4. So pause the recording and you work on number 2. So one more time, number 1, the simplify, when it says multiply, the first part is the two fractions multiplied together. The second answer states the domain for x. All right, pause the video and begin number 2. All right, now let's check our work. In the denominator of the first fraction, I can factor out an x. And in the numerator, I can break that down to x plus 2 times x plus 2. Okay, so now we can factor out an x plus 2. And now I'm left with x plus 2 over x times the quantity of x minus 2. But now, when I'm stating the domain, I got to use all parts of the denominator at this point. So I'm looking at this and this. So I have 1, 2, and 3 possible things that tell us that x cannot be. So set all 3 to equal to 0. X cannot equal. So for the first one, I know that for this one, x cannot equal 0. For the second one, x cannot equal negative 2. For the third denominator factor, I have x cannot equal positive 2. So the domain should state, all we're going to be left with is this, this, and this. So when I have it simplified, I end up with x plus 2 over the quantity of x times x minus 2. And x is such that x is an element of the reals. X cannot equal 0. X cannot equal 2. And x cannot equal negative 2. So the simplified version answer is x. Oops, sorry about that. So I'm just giving you a minute to write down the answer. And the simplified version of the second problem is x plus 2 over the quantity of x times the quantity of x minus 2. It's supposed to be a 2, that last one. All right, and that is factoring, multiplying rational expressions. That's it for today.